to all the clergy that have gathered here tonight, I just left MSNBC, where for the last hours, the first time I've done my whole show interviewing the parents of Trayvon Martin. Yeah. And I wanted the country to see that beyond the politics, beyond those that are in office or those that are lawyers or those that are advocates, that we're dealing with real human beings. And the thing that was most disconcerting to me about the trial was they talked about George Zimmerman like he was a human and Trayvon like he was an object. As we approach the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, many of the same issues that they faced 50 years ago, we're facing today. 50 years ago, they could not vote in the South. 50 years later, they have voter suppression scheme with voter ID. Somebody said, well, why don't you agree with ID, Reverend Al? We should have ID to vote. We always did have ID to vote. Why do we need new ID all of a sudden? And an ID that disproportionately is not something that all of us have and young folk have. So it's a voter ID scheme. We're still doubling unemployment. And now we have laws like Stand Your Ground, where they made it legal with this verdict, that if somebody follows you home tonight and you turn around and say something, they can say they're threatening and kill you and then claim self-defense, and a jury will say they're not guilty. Now that means I don't care how successful you are, where you went to school, what fraternity or sorority you're a member of, that if we are where they can suspend our voting rights and suspend our civil right for an unarmed, innocent young man to go home, it's time to march again. Did nobody ask Trayvon Martin for his W-2 form? Did no one ask him if he owned property? They saw a young man that was vulnerable, killed him. And the juror got on television and said, well, I think he should have went on home. He had a huge part in being killed. Stay in your place. We have no rights. And that is why on August 24th, we're not having a commemoration. We're having a continuation. 50 years ago when they went to Washington, you should read Dr. King's whole speech. King didn't just talk about a dream. That was at the end of the speech. He talked about how America had given the Negro, had given blacks a check that had bounced in the bank of justice and had been returned marked insufficient funds. Well, I come 50 years later to tell you that America has given this generation a check and it's bounced in the bank of justice. But it's not marked insufficient funds. It's marked stop payment. There's some that us justice. There's some that intend not to give us our right to vote. There's some that intend not to deal with us equally. They stop payment. But I come to tell you that the only way you break those determined to deny you is you got to be more determined not to be denied. Well, now they got big forces against us. They've been bigger than this. And we had less to fight with and did more with it. You realize that 50 years ago when they went to Washington, that many of them had to ride in the South to Washington in the back of the bus. Some drove their cars and had to sleep on the side of the road because it was against the law for them to rent a motel room. They had to drive with greasy paper bags because they couldn't stop at a restaurant to buy a meal. Yet they came under all of those conditions. And here you are 50 years later, living in the suburbs of New York, working downtown, got an education, got a way to make it, and too lazy and ungrateful to stand up for what others can't get. Sometimes things have to happen to wake you up. Sometimes God got to tap you on the shoulder to let you know that you're not beyond the reach of the wicked. But we're going to Washington August 24th to let them know that just like our fathers went 50 years ago, just like our mothers went 50 years ago, we are coming again and we are not going to accept anything less. They fought 50 years ago Jim Crow. 50 years later, Jim Crow has had children. They're a little more refined, a little more educated, a little more polished. Not Jim Crow, old Jim Crow. It's James Crow Jr. Esquire. Little slicker, little more polished, but same policies. Voter denial, criminal justice inequality, economic inequality. That's why we march. So Westchester needs to be represented with buses galore. Because no one has been promised more of the American dream and got out here and realized the inequality. Many of you use all you could to get out of the city and get out here and they still won't fund the schools. Still won't get a man of money we need to protect the city. We've gone from inner urban exploited to suburban exploited. Sitting out here trying to fake that you're doing all right. Trying to fake it till you make it. You better stand up and fight back and let this country know from Cuomo all the way across the board, we've not lost our nerve, we've not lost our courage. Just like Jim Crow had children, we're the children of Martin Luther King. We're the children discard their humanity. If nothing else, if we stand up, our children will know that they're worth being stood up for. When they came in that very Saturday night, young black children, young black men all over this country are watching to see if we're going to stand up and say, you can't do this to us. And that's why this march is important. There's certain times in history that whatever you do or whatever you don't do is going to define who you are. Your children would ask your parents, were you at the March on Washington 63? Were you involved with Martin Luther King? Did you know Malcolm X? Well, one day, they would ask when Trayvon Martin happened. One day, when they asked when they stopped the Voting Rights Act, where were you? They never asked you what designer clothes you had. They never asked you what kind of car you had. Whatever car you got to be out of style. Whatever clothes you got, nobody be wearing no more. You want to be able to say when it was time to stand up, whether I had on designer clothes or denim jackets, whether I had a brand new car or went in the back of the bus, I was a part of the number that stood and wouldn't let them turn the clock back. So I want us to pack buses. I want us to not be impressed with ourselves, but use the next 5 weeks to whatever station we work, whatever your title and position, to use it to make this blow for freedom. One week on, many of us, Saturday, we have 100 cities organized in front of federal buildings. In New York, Trayvon's mother's going with us right down to one police plaza. But in 99 other cities, we standing up, kicking off our countdown to that march. It's time to march again. It's time to put our egos aside. We do not need those that have the most and do the least. We need our preachers to realize our churches are not just for our praise on, but to get our work on. You ain't got nothing to praise for if you ain't done no work. Talking about you going down to heaven and get your rest. Rest for what? You ain't done nothing to be tired for. You've been resting down here. We need our teachers, our preachers, our leaders that will come together. Because it is clear as day that there are forces that are determined to turn back the clock. And I'm telling you, we can't let them do it. There are those that still look down on us after all we achieved. I remember Dr. Richardson, I tell him all the time. A few years ago when I ran for president, I remember we had a debate in Detroit. When I came off the stage that night, man stopped the reporter, said, Reverend Al, I said, yes. He said, you did pretty good. I said, thank you. He said, no, I think you won the debate. I said, well, thank you. He said, you ought to be proud of yourself. I said, why you say that? He said, up there with governors and senators and hold your own. I said, they ought to be proud to be up there with me. He said, what do you mean they ought to be proud to be up there with you? I said, when they were born on third base and think they hit a triple, I wasn't even born in the ballpark. I had to come through the parking lot, down through the stone that the builder rejected. The rejected stone. The one you laughed at, the one you discarded, the rejected stone. The one you said was worthless and wouldn't be nothing, the rejected stone would be the cornerstone. When this country, riches, was going bankrupt, when the auto industry fell, when the banks were closing, when Wall Street was trembling, they didn't go get nobody that had ancestors back to the Mayflower. They got a rejected stone. A boy whose daddy comes from Kenya, whose mom comes from Kenya, a rejected stone. That's why the rejected stone are going to Washington in August. We fought too hard. We cried too many tears. We spent too many nights in jail. We marched too long to turn around now. Stand up again and fight. Stand up again and represent. Well, right now, I don't know. It looks hard now. It looks like it's stacked against us. Look at the verdict. Look at the Voting Rights Act. Well, but look at if we put our faith where our forefathers did. If we but let God use us the way he used it. Some of y'all watching the news, but I'm watching where God's eternal